There's something quietly powerful about the way we choose to carry ourselves. It doesn't make a sound, yet it echoes through every part of our lives. You notice it in the way someone enters a room, the calm in their eyes, the way they face uncertainty without flinching. That presence doesn't come from knowing exactly how things will unfold. It comes from belief, the decision to act as if things will work out, even before there's proof. The Stoics understood this long before us. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind shapes its own reality, that strength comes not from what happens, but from the posture we take toward it. To live as if everything always works out isn't delusion. It's discipline. It's choosing courage over fear, resilience over despair, and trust over hesitation. And that choice, repeated day after day, transforms a life. If you're someone who wants to walk with that kind of stillness and strength, to stop waiting for certainty and start living with clarity, then please subscribe. Not just to follow along here, but to commit to your own growth, your own philosophy, your own unshakable self. Belief is invisible, but it quietly moves everything in our lives. You can't hold it in your hand, you can't measure it with a tool, but you can feel its presence in every room you walk into. You hear it in the tone of someone's voice, in whether they speak with doubt or with quiet certainty. You see it in the way a person stands, shoulders heavy with fear or lifted with resilience. You notice it in how they approach a challenge, either shrinking back, waiting for the blow to land, or leaning forward, ready to adjust and respond. Two people can face the exact same storm, but their lives unfold in completely different ways. One gets stuck in hesitation, questioning every move, while the other adapts, tries, learns, and keeps moving forward. The difference isn't luck, and it isn't about who's smarter. The difference is belief, the story each one carries into the storm. That story, though unseen, creates real consequences. A person who believes they are doomed to fail starts acting in ways that reinforce failure. They don't reach out, they don't knock on doors, they stop looking for the possibility of something better. It's not because the world has locked them out, it's because they've stopped trying the handle. Meanwhile, someone who carries the belief that things will eventually work out takes the same situation and walks through it differently. They stay a little longer in the conversation. They try again when the first attempt falls flat. They don't interpret rejection as a dead end, but as redirection. Think about how often you've seen this in your own life. You may have watched two people go through the same setback, losing a job, ending a relationship, facing uncertainty about the future. One becomes bitter, convinced that the universe has singled them out for hardship. The other, though just as shaken, decides to see it as a turning point, as something that might open a new door even if they can't see it yet. Months later, their paths look nothing alike. One is still stuck in the pain of what was lost, while the other has discovered possibilities they never imagined before. The circumstances didn't change, their beliefs did. What makes belief so powerful is not that it guarantees the outcome. It doesn't. Life is too unpredictable for that. What belief changes is your posture within uncertainty. A person who believes they'll fail will see every difficulty as confirmation, while a person who believes they can find a way through will see the same difficulty as a test of their resourcefulness. Seneca reminded us, "It is not that we suffer because of the events themselves, but because of the way we view them." Belief changes that view, and in doing so, it changes the way we suffer, the way we grow, and the way we rise. It's easy to underestimate this because belief is silent. You can't see it the way you see effort. You can't count it like money in a bank account, but it's there, shaping whether effort even gets spent, shaping whether opportunities even get noticed. Belief is the architect of behavior. It quietly designs how we respond to setbacks, whether we take risks, whether we follow through. And that design over time becomes the blueprint of a life. If you think back to your own turning points, chances are you'll find belief hiding at the center. Maybe it was a time you dared to try even when you didn't feel ready. Maybe it was a moment when you could have given up, but instead told yourself, let's see where this goes. Those decisions weren't made from certainty. They were born from belief, the invisible but powerful voice that told you to move forward anyway. And because you did, you created something real, a result, a memory, a piece of evidence that you could carry into the next challenge. This is why belief is never just wishful thinking. It is not about blind optimism or pretending problems don't exist. It is a strategy. It is the foundation of resilience and persistence. It is the choice to give yourself something solid to stand on before the ground has revealed itself. Plato once said, "The beginning is the most important part of the work." And belief is that beginning. It's the inner commitment that sets everything else in motion. So when you find yourself hesitating at the edge of something new, when fear whispers that you don't have enough proof, remember this. Proof comes later. Belief comes first. It's not about waiting for a guarantee. It's about carrying a mindset that allows you to act without one. Because once you begin, once you take that step, the evidence you were searching for starts to reveal itself piece by piece. And in that way, belief becomes self-fulfilling, not because it bends the world to your will, but because it bends you into someone who can meet the world differently. That's why the invisible power of belief is never really invisible at all. It shows up in your actions, in your presence, in your resilience. It shows up in the way people are drawn to you, not because you promise certainty, but because you carry yourself as if you trust the process, as if you know you'll find a way. Belief is the quiet signal that tells others you are anchored even in the storm. And when you live from that place, you don't just change your outcomes, you change the way you experience the journey itself. We are all storytellers, though most of us don't realize it. From the moment you wake up in the morning, your mind begins weaving a narrative about who you are, where you're heading, and what today means for you. The story isn't written in ink, but it's no less powerful for being invisible. It plays in the background like a soundtrack, guiding your steps, shaping your decisions, and silently defining what you think is possible. And here's the remarkable thing. The brain doesn't argue with the story. It accepts it. It takes the words you repeat to yourself and treats them as truth, no matter how limiting or liberating they may be. That's why the question isn't whether you're telling a story. The question is, which story are you telling? Is it the one that keeps you trapped, or the one that sets you free? Consider how two people can experience the exact same event, yet interpret it in completely different ways. One person loses a job and tells themselves, "This is the end. I wasn't good enough. Life is unfair." Another loses a job and says, "This is an opening, a chance to rebuild, a push towards something better." The event itself is neutral. What gives it meaning is the story. And that story dictates behavior. The one who believes they're a failure will shrink, hesitate, and avoid opportunities. The one who believes the setback is a stepping stone will take risks, show up differently, and eventually create something new. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The story you choose is where that power begins. Think about the stories you've been repeating to yourself. Maybe you've been whispering, "I'm not the kind of person who succeeds at this." Maybe you've convinced yourself you're unlucky, or that opportunities aren't meant for you. Over time, these aren't just words. They become a lens you see life through. Your brain starts scanning for evidence to support the narrative you've given it. It says, "You believe you're unlucky. Fine, I'll show you examples to confirm it. This isn't the brain trying to sabotage you. It's doing its job, creating coherence, building a world that makes sense according to the story you've already written. This is why changing your story is one of the most powerful acts of self-mastery. It doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means rewriting the meaning of reality. When something difficult happens, your brain asks a question. What does this mean? If you've already decided that life is against you, the answer will reinforce hopelessness. But if you carry the belief that things are working in your favor, even when you can't see how yet, the same event becomes fuel for growth. Seneca reminded us, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a person perfected without trials." If the story you carry includes that truth, then every difficulty becomes part of the polishing. You can probably remember a moment where a single shift in story changed everything for you. Maybe you were facing rejection and felt crushed until you reframed it as protection from the wrong path. Maybe you were stuck in a challenge that felt unbearable until you began to see it as training rather than punishment. The external situation didn't change. What changed was the story, and with it, your energy, your persistence, and your ability to move forward. That's why the Stoics often reminded themselves that events are not good or bad in themselves. It's our interpretation that decides. And those interpretations are nothing more than stories we've chosen to believe. Stories aren't just about setbacks, though. They also define your identity. If you tell yourself you're a person who never follows through, you'll act in ways that confirm it. If you believe you're resourceful and adaptable, you'll prove yourself right in the moments that matter. The narrative you carry into a room speaks before you do. It's in your posture, your tone, your willingness to try, and over time, those subtle signals shape how others respond to you. Belief becomes behavior, and behavior becomes reputation. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." When you craft a story that aligns with the person you want to become, your actions naturally begin to follow. But here's where many people get stuck. They think the story they inherited is the one they must keep living. Maybe a parent told you that you'd never amount to much, or a teacher doubted your ability. Maybe someone's fear was projected onto you and you carried it as your own. Without realizing it, their story became your story. But the truth is, you always have the right to edit. You always have the ability to decide which words get repeated and which ones don't. Stories written by others may have shaped your past, but only you can decide the script for your future. Let's not pretend this is easy. Stories are sticky. The longer you've repeated one, the more comfortable it feels, even if it's damaging. The brain prefers the familiar because it feels safe. That's why self-doubt feels strangely natural, while self-belief feels like a stretch. This is where belief and storytelling connect. When you choose to act as if everything always works out for you, you're not lying to yourself. You're giving your brain a better narrative to follow. Instead of whispering, "I'll never make it," you say, "This is just part of the process, and I will find a way." Instead of thinking, "I'm cursed with bad luck," you reframe it as, "Life is redirecting me to something better." Those aren't empty affirmations. They are new scripts designed to guide your actions differently. Over time, they create results that reinforce the belief. Imagine someone building a business. In the early stages, nothing is certain. One person tells themselves, "This is proof I'm not cut out for it." They stop trying. Another says, "This is evidence I'm learning what doesn't work." They keep going. Which one do you think eventually finds success? Not because of talent or intelligence alone, but because of the story they chose to live inside. The most inspiring people you know, the ones who light up a room, who make you feel like things are possible, aren't necessarily the most gifted. They are the ones who carry stories of resilience, of growth, of possibility. Their belief is contagious because their story radiates through their actions. When you're around them, you start to believe a little more in your own story too. That's the ripple effect of storytelling. It doesn't stop with you. It shapes the way others around you interpret their own lives. So the challenge is simple, but not easy. Notice the story you're telling. Catch yourself when you repeat the old scripts that limit you. Ask whether that narrative is useful, whether it makes you stronger or weaker, and if it's not serving you, choose a better one. Because the brain will believe whatever story it hears most often, and that voice is usually your own. You can decide whether that voice becomes a critic or a coach, a prison guard or a liberator. In the end, the stories we tell ourselves are not just reflections of who we are. They are blueprints for who we are becoming. If you keep repeating a narrative of weakness, your life will bend toward weakness. If you carry a story of resilience, your life will rise toward strength. So ask yourself now, what story are you rehearsing? Is it one of limitation or one of possibility? Because whichever story you choose, your brain will believe it, and your life will follow its lead. And if you decide to act as if everything always works out for you, you're not simply telling yourself a comforting lie. You're giving yourself the structure to face uncertainty with strength, to turn trials into training, and to step into a future written by choice rather than by fear. That story, repeated daily, becomes not just words in your mind, but a reality in your life. And it all begins with the courage to tell yourself a better one. We're told all our lives to be realistic, as if realism is the wisest path, the safeguard that will keep us from disappointment. Parents say it to their children when they dream too big. Teachers say it when students set their sights on something unconventional. Friends say it when our goals scare them more than they inspire them. And yet, if you listen closely, you'll notice something hiding beneath those words. Often, be realistic doesn't mean balance or clarity. It means lower your expectations. It means don't reach too far. It means prepare for disappointment by choosing smaller dreams. But in practice, that kind of realism becomes nothing more than resignation dressed up as wisdom. It feels safe, but in reality, it's the very thing that keeps people from ever stepping into the life they're capable of living. When you let realism dominate your thinking, it slowly drains away possibility. Instead of daring to ask, "What if this works?" you begin whispering, "What if it doesn't?" That shift in language may seem small, but it changes everything. The first question moves you forward. The second keeps you standing still. And the irony is that the most realistic approach often ends up creating the very outcomes people fear. Lower your aim to avoid disappointment, and you end up with a life of quiet disappointment anyway. Avoid risk to stay safe, and you still find yourself restless, wondering what might have been if you had only tried. Seneca once warned, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." A life spent being too realistic is one of the most effective ways to waste it. There's a reason why the great thinkers and leaders of history rarely describe themselves as realists. They lean towards something more daring, possibility, imagination, vision. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the soul becomes the color of its thoughts. Epictetus taught that it is not events themselves, but our judgments about them, that harm us. None of these voices said, "Shrink your life to fit what seems safe." They knew that the human spirit is crushed not by failure itself, but by the refusal to try. And what is realism but the clever excuse we use to justify that refusal? The trap of realism is subtle because it masquerades as responsibility. You may even believe you're being practical, that you're saving yourself from foolishness. But if you look closer, you'll see that what you're really doing is letting fear dictate your choices. Realism tells you not to start the business because most fail. Realism tells you not to pursue the relationship because heartbreak is possible. Realism tells you not to take the leap because the ground beneath your feet is more familiar than the air above. But Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." Realism, when it becomes resignation, convinces you that you are nothing more than your past or your present. Belief, on the other hand, allows you to act as if the future can still be rewritten. This doesn't mean we throw away all sense of reason. Blind optimism can be just as destructive as paralyzing realism. The balance lies in grounded hope, in choosing to step forward not because the outcome is certain, but because you trust yourself to adapt. When people tell you to be realistic, what they often mean is, don't expect too much. But why not? Why shouldn't you expect more from yourself, from your work, from your relationships? Why should you trade the possibility of greatness for the guarantee of mediocrity? It is true that not every dream comes to fruition, but it is also true that no dream can live without the courage to pursue it. The realist avoids pain by never stepping into the arena. The one who acts with belief endures pain, but also discovers transformation. Which path truly honors the short span of time we've been given? Realism also has another danger. It becomes self-fulfilling. If you believe your efforts will fail, you will unconsciously act in ways that confirm it. You will hesitate instead of act. You will avoid instead of pursue. You will interpret every setback as evidence that you were foolish to try. The realist might call this wisdom, but it is really surrender. Epictetus once said, "You become what you give your attention to." If your attention is on avoiding disappointment, then your life becomes a series of avoided risks, missed opportunities, and quiet regrets. You can see this clearly in moments of transition. Someone loses their job, and realism says, "Don't expect anything better. Just settle for what you can get." Another person loses their job, and belief says, "This may be the chance to step into something more aligned with who I really am." Both people face the same loss. One resigns, the other transforms. The difference lies in which voice they listened to. The people we admire most rarely lived realistic lives. They were the ones who chose to act as if possibility was worth chasing, even when it made no sense to others. Their stories remind us that the safest path is often the most dangerous, because it leads to a life unlived. Socrates reminded his followers that an unexamined life is not worth living. To examine your life is to ask whether you are making choices from freedom or from fear. Too often, realism disguises fear so well that we no longer recognize its voice. When you allow yourself to rise above realism, you begin to see that life is not about guarantees. It is about participation. It is about showing up fully, even when the outcome is uncertain. A person who acts only when certainty is promised will never move. A person who acts with belief, who dares to expect more, begins shaping outcomes that were invisible at first. That's why optimism is not naive. It's courageous. It takes courage to see possibility where others see limitation, to walk into the unknown carrying a conviction that something meaningful will come of it. The truth is, most people are not defeated by external obstacles. They are defeated by the internal story of what's realistic. They never attempt the book, the business, the dream, because they have convinced themselves it's impossible. Yet history is filled with examples of those who ignored realism and created something extraordinary. Was it realistic for a philosopher to spend years writing meditations for no one but himself, words that would last centuries longer than his empire? Was it realistic for an artist to paint when no one valued their work in their lifetime? And yet, their refusal to be bound by realism gave the world treasures that endure. You don't need to abandon all caution or ignore the facts, but you must recognize when realism has crossed into resignation, when it has stopped serving you as a guide and has started chaining you as a prison. At that point, the wise choice is not to shrink your dreams, but to expand your courage. So the next time someone tells you to be realistic, pause and listen carefully. Are they offering wisdom, or are they projecting fear? Are they encouraging you to prepare well, or are they quietly telling you to lower your standards? You'll know the difference because one will sharpen you and the other will shrink you. One will leave you feeling capable, the other will leave you feeling smaller. And when you notice the difference, you'll understand why realism, more often than not, is just another name for surrender. The greatest trap of realism is that it sounds sensible. It whispers that you are wise for avoiding risk, that you are clever for lowering your hopes. But in truth, it keeps you circling the same small ground, never daring to see what lies beyond it. Life is far too short for that. And if you want to live fully, you must be willing to risk disappointment for the chance at discovery. Because the alternative, a life shaped by fear, disguised as realism, is no life at all. In the end, the call is not to abandon realism entirely, but to see it for what it often is, a mask for resignation, a voice of fear. Your task is to replace it with a stronger voice, one that says, even if I fail, I will learn. Even if I stumble, I will rise. Even if I lose, I will grow. That is not reckless hope. That is disciplined belief, and it is the belief that turns life from something merely survived into something deeply lived. Because the truth is, it was never realism that moved the world forward. It was always those who dared to believe in more. Two people can face the exact same moment in life, yet walk away with two completely different realities. One person loses their job and quietly tells themselves, "This proves I wasn't good enough. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe life is against me." Another person loses their job and says, "This hurts, but maybe it's an opening to something better. Maybe it's the moment I've been pushed into a path I never would have chosen on my own." The facts of the event are identical. Both people are unemployed. Both have bills to pay. Both feel uncertainty pressing on their shoulders. But the meaning they assign to the event, the lens they choose to look through, changes everything about how their future unfolds. Carl Jung once said, "It all depends on how we look at things and not how they are in themselves." That is the lens at work. This lens isn't something we put on once in a while. It's always with us. It's the set of stories, beliefs, and assumptions that shape the way we interpret every experience. The same rainstorm is a ruined afternoon for one person and a blessing for another. The same criticism is crushing to one person and a chance to improve for another. The same rejection is evidence of inadequacy to one and a redirection to better alignment for another. It isn't life that assigns meaning to our moments, it's us. And that meaning has real consequences because it dictates not just how we feel, but what we do next. The danger is that most of us don't even realize we're looking through a lens at all. We assume what we see is reality itself, when in truth it's reality filtered through layers of past experiences, old fears, and stories we've repeated so many times we no longer question them. Someone who grew up being told they would never succeed might see every obstacle as validation of that script. Someone who was encouraged to experiment and fail might see obstacles as stepping stones. Both are looking at the same situation, but their lenses are so different they may as well be living in different worlds. And this is where self-awareness becomes so crucial. If you don't take the time to examine the lens you're using, it will quietly govern your life without your permission. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." He wasn't dismissing pain. He was pointing to the fact that our lens often magnifies suffering unnecessarily. We imagine outcomes that never come to pass. We interpret difficulties as permanent when they are often temporary. We let the story we've told ourselves add weight to what is already heavy. But when you realize the suffering is magnified by interpretation, you begin to loosen its grip. Think about how this plays out in daily life. A setback at work can be seen as humiliation or as a push to sharpen your skills. A tough conversation can be proof that relationships are fragile or proof that honesty can make them stronger. Even silence from someone can be read as rejection or as an opportunity to build independence. The lens you choose doesn't just change your feelings in the moment. It sets a trajectory for where your energy goes. One path leads to despair, the other to resilience. Epictetus often reminded his students that events themselves are indifferent. It is our opinions about them that cause turmoil. If you train your mind to pause before labeling an event as good or bad, you give yourself a chance to shape the meaning more intentionally. Losing a job isn't automatically a curse or a blessing, it's raw material. What you build from it depends on the lens you choose to apply. And here's the subtle truth. That lens doesn't just change how you think, it changes the way you act, and those actions create real, tangible outcomes. Consider someone who tells themselves after a setback, "I'm not good enough." With that belief, they stop trying, avoid risks, and shy away from opportunities. The lens has trapped them in a cycle that ensures their story becomes reality. Now consider the person who says, "This is an opening to something better." That belief energizes them to network, to search, to refine their craft. They walk into rooms with curiosity instead of shame. They may not land the perfect outcome immediately, but their lens sets them in motion, and motion is what creates opportunity. The event was the same. The lens built two entirely different futures. What makes this challenging is that lenses are often inherited. You didn't choose them consciously. They were passed down by parents, reinforced by teachers, shaped by early experiences. Maybe you were told to play it safe, and now safety colors every decision. Maybe you were told the world is harsh, and now you interpret every interaction through suspicion. Shifting your lens doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. It happens the next time something doesn't go your way, and you pause to ask, what else could this mean? That question creates a crack in the old narrative, a chance for new meaning to enter. Slowly, those moments accumulate, and the lens begins to clear. Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You cannot become who you are meant to be if you remain trapped behind a lens built from fear and resignation. You become yourself by reshaping the meaning of your experiences into something that builds rather than breaks you. And it's important to see that choosing a different lens isn't the same as denying pain. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's about holding pain in one hand and possibility in the other. It's about saying, yes, this hurts, and yes, it can also teach me something. The realist will call this naive, but the Stoic would call it strength. Because strength isn't about ignoring the storm, it's about choosing how to see yourself within it. Look closely at the people you admire most, and you'll notice they are not the ones who avoided hardship. They are the ones who interpreted hardship differently. They didn't see failure as a final verdict. They saw it as training. They didn't see rejection as proof of worthlessness. They saw it as redirection. Their lens didn't remove difficulty, but it transformed it into fuel. That's why their lives inspire, not because they escaped struggle, but because they turned struggle into a foundation. Every day, life hands you experiences. Some are joyful, some are painful, some are confusing. The lens you carry determines whether those experiences become anchors or wings. You can allow them to hold you down, or you can let them lift you into new strength. And while you may not always control the timing or the nature of events, you always control the meaning you assign to them. That meaning becomes your compass. It guides where you go, how you endure, and what you create next. So when the next challenge comes, and it will, remember that you have a choice. You can see it through the lens that says, "This proves I am not enough." Or you can choose the lens that says, "This is opening something I cannot see yet." One path narrows your life, the other expands it. And if you begin living with the conviction that everything works out for you, your lens will start searching for evidence of that truth. Slowly, you'll notice opportunities you missed before, strength you didn't know you had, doors you didn't even realize were waiting to open. The lens you carry colors every experience, but you are the one who decides what shade it takes. Choose carefully, because in time, that choice becomes the story of your life. And if you choose the lens that frees you instead of the one that limits you, you'll begin to see that the world has always held more possibility than you realized. It was your perception that had to change. Your brain is one of the most powerful storytellers you'll ever meet. And the strange thing is, it's always working on your behalf, even when it feels like it's working against you. Every second of your life, your mind is scanning the environment, filtering out endless amounts of information and piecing together a picture that feels coherent. But here's the secret. It builds that picture based on the story you've already told it. If you whisper to yourself day after day that you're unlucky, your brain will look for proof that reinforces it. It will highlight every rejection, every missed opportunity, every disappointment, and stitch them into a narrative of failure. On the other hand, if you tell yourself that things always have a way of working out, your brain shifts its focus. It starts scanning for opportunities, spotting details you would have overlooked, and drawing connections that support the idea of possibility. The world hasn't changed, your lens has. Carl Jung once said, "Perception is real, even if it is not reality." What he meant is that the way you frame your experiences becomes the reality you live inside. The brain isn't concerned with absolute truth, it's concerned with consistency. If you keep repeating that you're doomed to struggle, your mind will accept it as a directive. It will quietly align your actions to support that belief. You'll hesitate when you should act. You'll doubt yourself when you should persist. You'll walk into a room already convinced of defeat, and others will sense it. Not because failure is written in your destiny, but because your biology is carrying out the orders of your belief. This mechanism has a scientific name, confirmation bias. It's your brain's tendency to favor information that aligns with what you already believe, while ignoring or downplaying anything that contradicts it. It's efficient, but it's also limiting. Imagine believing you're unlucky. A stranger smiles at you on the street, but your mind dismisses it as meaningless. Later, someone cuts you off in traffic, and your brain pounces. See? Proof you're cursed with bad luck. Both events happened, but your brain decided which one mattered, because it had already been given its instructions. Epictetus understood this long before neuroscience confirmed it. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Your reaction is shaped by what your mind has been primed to notice. The fascinating thing is that the reverse is also true. If you give your brain a belief that supports growth, it will search tirelessly for evidence to back it up. You tell yourself, "Everything works out for me," and suddenly that smile from a stranger isn't meaningless. It's a sign the world isn't as cold as you thought. The inconvenience of being cut off in traffic becomes a reminder that you arrived safely, not evidence of a curse. The events didn't change, but the meaning did, and so did the emotional weight you carried away from them. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. If your thoughts set your brain's filter to possibility, your life begins to bend in that direction. What makes this even more powerful is the feedback loop it creates. Once your brain starts finding evidence for your belief, it reinforces the belief itself. You say, "I will figure this out." Then notice yourself making small progress, which strengthens your conviction, which fuels more action. Each cycle builds upon the last, until belief and evidence blur into one. What started as an act of faith becomes a reality, supported by experience. This is why so many people who decide to act as if everything will work out eventually find that it does. Not because the universe magically bends, but because their biology keeps them in motion long enough to create outcomes that match the story they've chosen. Seneca captured this dynamic in his writings when he said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." The imagination he spoke of is nothing more than the brain's filter at work. Fear primes your mind to search for threats, and it finds them everywhere. But belief primes your mind to search for solutions, and those begin to multiply. The world is filled with both danger and opportunity. The filter you hand your brain determines which one you'll notice most. You've probably seen this play out in people around you. Some carry an air of defeat everywhere they go. Even when something good happens, they dismiss it. They'll win a small victory but say, "It won't last." Their brain takes the cue and files it away as an exception. Others, though, carry themselves with a kind of quiet optimism. They see even setbacks as part of the process. They say, "This is teaching me something," and their brain obediently scans for lessons instead of evidence of doom. The same world, two entirely different lives. The question then is simple but profound. Which filter are you handing your brain? If you feed it stories of limitation, you shouldn't be surprised when it delivers a life defined by those limits. If you give it stories of resilience, it will become your ally, searching constantly for signs that confirm your strength. This is why the practice of reframing is so powerful. When something goes wrong, instead of letting your brain automatically confirm the worst, you pause. You ask, "What else could this mean?" That small question cracks open the rigid filter and lets in light. Lose an opportunity, and instead of saying, "This proves I'm not good enough," you say, "Maybe this wasn't the right fit. Maybe something better is being prepared." That's not denial, it's redirection. It doesn't ignore pain, but it refuses to let pain dictate the story. And here's the deeper truth. Your brain isn't just scanning for evidence in the world, it's also scanning inside you. Every action you take becomes proof it uses to either strengthen or weaken your belief. This is why action is so crucial. Tell yourself you're resilient, then take even one small step forward, and your brain records it as evidence. You didn't just say it, you lived it. Over time, the accumulated weight of those actions builds a belief system that feels unshakable. Epictetus's words echo here. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. When your actions become evidence, your philosophy becomes your reality. Of course, the brain will always try to save energy by running old scripts. It prefers the familiar, even when the familiar is harmful. That's why changing your filter feels uncomfortable at first. Believing in possibility when you've been telling yourself a story of failure can feel unnatural, even foolish. But discomfort doesn't mean it's wrong. It means you're breaking an old habit. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Changing the filter is not a single decision. It is a repeated act, a habit of choosing possibility over fear until the brain accepts it as the new normal. This process takes patience. At times, your brain will fight back, trying to drag you into the old narrative. But if you persist, if you keep handing it a better filter, the shift will come. Slowly, opportunities will begin to stand out, where before you only saw obstacles. You'll notice your energy shifting. You'll find yourself responding differently to challenges, carrying yourself with more calm and confidence. It's not magic. It's biology following the orders of your chosen belief. The beauty of this is that once your brain accepts a new filter, it begins to work on your behalf without you even asking. It will highlight connections, spark creativity, and lead you to insights that align with your chosen story. A belief in resilience makes your mind resourceful. A belief in failure makes it defensive. Both are self-fulfilling, but only one leads to growth. So the question comes back, as it always does. What filter are you giving your brain? Because whether you realize it or not, your biology is already at work building a reality to match the story you've chosen. If you've been living under the weight of a limiting belief, understand this: you are not stuck with it. You can change the filter. You can choose to act as if everything always works out for you, not because life guarantees it, but because that belief sets your mind in motion to create outcomes that look a lot like things working out. The power of belief isn't abstract. It's not a motivational slogan. It's the wiring of your biology, the mechanism of your brain, the unseen engine that colors your days and shapes your future. If you want a different life, begin with a different story. Give your brain the filter that empowers rather than weakens. And then watch as your biology does the rest, aligning perception, guiding action, and creating evidence that matches the belief you've chosen to live by. In the end, it isn't the world that proves you right or wrong. It's your brain, faithfully searching for the world you've instructed it to see. Optimism is often misunderstood. People hear the word and imagine someone walking around with blinders on, pretending everything is fine while the world burns around them. They think it's denial, a refusal to see reality for what it is. But real optimism is nothing like that. Real optimism is discipline. It is the daily choice to search for possibilities, even when your fears scream louder than your hope. It is the strength to look into the storm and say, I may not know how, but I will find a way through. Pessimism is easy. Cynicism is effortless. Anyone can point at what's broken and declare it hopeless. But optimism, true, grounded optimism, takes training. It takes strength. It is a posture of resilience, not delusion. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in the darkest of times, reminded his own heart, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That is optimism as discipline. It doesn't say the obstacle isn't there. It says the obstacle itself can be used, transformed into progress. The person who trains themselves to see that truth develops a kind of quiet power. They stop wasting energy resisting what has already happened and instead focus on how to move forward. This is not naivety. It's mastery of perspective. The truth is, pessimism comes naturally because it requires nothing of you. It's a retreat. It spares you the discomfort of hope. When you expect the worst, you insulate yourself from disappointment, but you also cut yourself off from possibility. The pessimist says, "If I don't believe in anything, I won't get hurt." But in doing so, they live in a cage of their own making. Optimism requires you to risk disappointment in exchange for discovery. It asks you to carry hope even when you've been let down before. That's why it is discipline. It must be chosen again and again, especially when it's hardest to choose. Think about how this plays out in the small, ordinary struggles of daily life. You face rejection. Pessimism whispers, "See? You're not worthy. Why bother trying again?" But optimism as discipline responds, "This hurts, but it's also proof I'm alive, that I'm daring. It's teaching me something I'll need for the next attempt." you face failure. Pessimism says, this is the end. Optimism says, this is feedback. Same event, different story. And the story you choose becomes the energy you carry forward. This mindset is not built overnight. It grows like a muscle. At first, it feels unnatural, even forced. You might wake up, and your first instinct is dread. The day feels heavy before it begins. But then you deliberately redirect your focus. You ask yourself, what can I still build today? What remains possible? That small act is optimism as discipline. Each time you practice it, you strengthen the neural pathways that support it. Over time, it becomes easier. Not effortless, but natural. And this isn't just philosophy, it's biology. The brain is wired with what psychologists call the negativity bias. We naturally notice threats more than opportunities because survival once depended on it. That's why pessimism feels instinctive. But our wiring can be trained. By deliberately practicing optimism, by searching for what remains possible, you begin to reshape the way your brain filters the world. You start to notice patterns of opportunity instead of only patterns of danger. The world doesn't become easier, you become stronger within it. There's also something magnetic about someone who carries optimism as discipline. Think of the people you admire most, the ones who seem steady even in chaos. They don't sugarcoat reality, but they also don't collapse under it. Their optimism creates calm, a sense of direction, a feeling that things can be figured out. Others are drawn to them, not because they have all the answers, but because they refuse to surrender their spirit to despair. Optimism becomes a form of leadership, not through speeches or slogans, but through presence. This is why optimism must not be confused with wishful thinking. Wishful thinking says, everything will be fine if I just hope hard enough. Optimism as discipline says, everything may not be fine yet, but I trust myself to find a way through. One is passive, the other active. One waits for the world to change, the other begins changing the way it responds to the world. The disciplined optimist doesn't ignore risk. They face it with eyes open, but they refuse to let risk paralyze them. In practice, this means optimism is not about eliminating fear. It's about choosing what voice you'll listen to. Fear will always be there, whispering its doubts. But optimism steps in as the louder voice, saying, yes, this is uncertain, but I have the strength to endure. Yes, this is difficult, but it may also hold hidden gifts. The discipline is in choosing which voice guides your next step. When you live this way, you begin to see setbacks differently. A door closes, but you don't collapse. You ask where another might open. A plan fails, but instead of stopping, you treat it as data. You keep moving, keep refining, keep building. Over time, people call this resilience. But resilience is just optimism trained into habit. It is the fruit of choosing belief again and again, until it becomes part of who you are. The disciplined optimist is not untouched by pain. They feel it deeply. They have doubts, they stumble, they question, but they return again and again to the posture of belief. They carry themselves with quiet strength, not because they expect life to be easy, but because they've trained themselves to expect that life, no matter how harsh, will always hold a way forward. And in the long run, that choice changes everything. So when you hear the word optimism, don't mistake it for naivety. See it for what it really is. Discipline. The courage to keep choosing possibility when fear feels louder. The strength to treat obstacles as teachers. The commitment to carry hope, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because without hope, there is no reason to move at all. In a world where pessimism is the path of least resistance, optimism is rebellion. It is the discipline of refusing to surrender your future to despair, and that discipline, practiced day by day, will shape not just your mindset, but your entire life. We grow up believing that confidence is something we're supposed to wait for, that belief in ourselves has to come before any action. We tell ourselves, when I feel ready, I'll start. When I'm sure I can succeed, then I'll move. But life rarely works that way. If you keep waiting for confidence to arrive before you act, you'll wait forever. Belief doesn't usually come first. It is built through the process of doing. You take a step, however uncertain, and in that step, you discover that you didn't fall apart. You try something new, and even if you stumble, you learn that stumbling isn't fatal. Slowly, one action at a time, your brain begins to build a library of evidence that you are stronger, more capable, and more adaptable than you thought. Confidence is not a prerequisite, it's a byproduct. The people who seem most self-assured didn't sit around waiting to feel certain before they acted. They moved anyway. They risked embarrassment, failure, rejection. They acted without guarantees, and because they acted, they gathered the proof they needed to believe in themselves. Aristotle once wrote, "We become just by doing just acts, brave by doing brave acts." His point was simple. We don't wait to feel brave in order to do something courageous. We act courageously first, and in the act, courage is formed. Carl Jung echoed this idea in another way when he said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Identity doesn't grow from promises or plans. It grows from actions, from the small decisions you make every day to show up, even when fear whispers that you shouldn't. The moment you take that first step, no matter how shaky, you give your mind something real to work with. The thought, "I can't handle this," begins to lose power when your actions prove otherwise. Think about times in your life when you discovered this truth without even realizing it. Maybe you were nervous before a presentation, convinced you couldn't handle it, but once you started speaking, the nerves settled. Maybe you dreaded a difficult conversation, but once you faced it, you realized it wasn't as unbearable as you imagined. In each case, action came first, and belief followed. If you had waited until you felt confident, you might never have begun. But because you moved, you created the confidence you thought you needed. This is why the first step is often the hardest, but also the most transformative. Before action, all you have is theory, doubts, assumptions, imagined scenarios. After action, you have evidence. You know, at the very least, that you can survive trying. You know that rejection didn't kill you, that failure taught you something, that discomfort eventually passes. Each piece of evidence adds weight to the belief that you can continue. Slowly, step by step, you build a foundation of confidence, not by thinking, but by doing. Think of a child learning to walk. They don't wait until they feel confident before taking their first step. They wobble, they fall, they try again. With each attempt, they gather proof that their legs can hold them. Eventually, walking becomes natural. Adults are no different. We only learn we're capable by testing ourselves, by stepping into the unknown and allowing experience to show us what we can handle. Waiting for confidence before moving is like waiting to get stronger before you ever lift a weight. The strength only comes through practice. This principle applies to every part of life. Starting a new career, building a relationship, creating something of your own, all of it requires moving before you feel ready. The painter who waits until they're certain of perfection will never touch the canvas. The entrepreneur who waits until all the risk is gone will never start. The person who waits to feel confident before speaking up will stay silent. But the one who dares to act, who is willing to learn in motion, begins to gather proof that changes everything. Of course, action doesn't always bring immediate success. Sometimes you'll fail. Sometimes you'll be rejected. Sometimes you'll realize your first attempt was clumsy or misguided. But even in those moments, action provides evidence, not of failure, but of resilience. You learn that you can withstand loss, adapt, and try again. Each setback adds to your proof, reminding you that you're still standing, still learning, still capable of moving forward. In time, even failure becomes part of the evidence that fuels belief. There's also something contagious about people who live this way. When you see someone act with conviction, even in uncertainty, it inspires you to believe that you can too. Their courage becomes evidence not only for themselves, but for those watching. This is why leadership isn't just about words or titles, it's about example. The person who dares to act first lowers the psychological cost for everyone else. They prove through their willingness to try that the path is survivable. And that proof spreads, igniting belief in others. So much of our hesitation in life comes from waiting for a feeling. We think, when I feel brave, I'll speak. When I feel confident, I'll try. When I feel ready, I'll begin. But feelings follow actions more often than actions follow feelings. The only way to feel ready is to start. The only way to feel confident is to move. The only way to believe in yourself is to collect evidence that you can handle what life places in front of you. That evidence isn't found in waiting, it's found in trying. In the end, the choice is clear. You can wait indefinitely for confidence to appear, or you can move and let confidence catch up with you. One path leaves you stuck in hesitation, trapped in doubt. The other puts you in motion, building proof with every step. And over time, that proof becomes unshakable belief, not because you dreamed it into existence, but because you lived it. Action is the architect of confidence. It is the teacher of belief. It is the discipline that transforms uncertainty into strength. So ask yourself honestly, are you still waiting to feel ready, or are you willing to begin and let readiness grow in the process? Because the moment you take that first uncertain step, you've already started to build the evidence that will one day become your unshakable confidence. And that evidence will not come from sitting still, it will come from the courage to move. So many people sit at the edge of their own lives, convinced that the perfect moment is coming. They wait for the fear to quiet down, for the doubts to fade, for the green light from the world that says, now you're ready. But waiting is deceptive. It feels safe. It feels responsible. It feels like you're preparing. Yet the truth is that waiting kills progress. The fog of uncertainty rarely lifts before you step forward. More often, it only clears as you walk. And the longer you stand still, the more fear grows, whispering louder with every passing day, until the very thing you were waiting to avoid, failure, becomes inevitable through inaction. Think about how waiting shapes your inner dialogue. At first, you convince yourself you're just being patient. You'll start when you feel more confident, when you have more resources, when the conditions improve. But over time, hesitation becomes a habit. You train your brain to associate possibility with paralysis. Opportunities come and go, and you begin to rationalize that they weren't meant for you anyway. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you had 1,000 years to live. Fate is at your elbow." He was reminding himself and us that time is slipping away faster than we admit. Waiting feels endless until suddenly it isn't, and you find yourself wondering where the years have gone. The paradox of progress is that clarity often comes after you move, not before. You cannot chart the entire path in advance because life reveals itself step by step. The fog doesn't clear when you stand still, staring into it. It clears as you take each hesitant step forward. This is why action, however imperfect, always beats waiting. Even mistakes become data, guiding you toward what works. When you reflect on the moments you're most proud of, chances are they weren't times when you waited until you were fully prepared. They were moments when you moved anyway, when you dared to speak up, to take the risk, to enter the unknown without a guarantee. Those moments carry weight because they broke through hesitation. They gave you proof that you are capable, not because you already knew, but because you found out along the way. Waiting also distorts reality. The longer you delay, the bigger the challenge appears in your imagination. What might have been a manageable step starts to feel like a mountain. Fear thrives in stillness. It spins stories, amplifies doubts, and convinces you that you're not ready. But the moment you move, reality steps in. Often the task is not as impossible as your imagination made it. The conversation isn't as terrifying, the project isn't as overwhelming, the leap isn't as deadly. Action shrinks fear because it replaces fantasy with fact. The tragedy is that many people confuse waiting with preparing. Preparation has movement. It sharpens skills, builds relationships, lays foundations. Waiting, on the other hand, is passive. It's rehearsing the same fears, circling the same what-ifs, until the opportunity has passed. Epictetus once taught, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" It is a question that cuts through excuses. At what point does waiting stop being patience and start being avoidance? This isn't to say every pause is wrong. Reflection has its place. Rest has its value. But waiting for the perfect moment is an illusion. The perfect moment never comes. Conditions are never flawless. There will always be risk, uncertainty, discomfort. The people who build lives of meaning are not those who wait for guarantees, but those who move despite uncertainty. They understand that progress is made in motion, not in endless rehearsal. Think about the fog metaphor again. If you stand at the edge of a foggy road, you can't see more than a few feet ahead. Waiting doesn't reveal more of the path, but with every step forward, a new few feet come into view. Eventually, the whole road reveals itself, but only because you kept walking. Life is no different. Opportunities unfold in motion. Confidence grows in motion. Clarity comes in motion. Everything you're waiting for is hidden in the steps you haven't taken yet. And there is a deeper cost to waiting: regret. When you look back, it's rarely the risks you took that haunt you. It's the chances you never dared to take, the book you never wrote, the words you never said, the step you never took. Regret is often the echo of waiting. You realize too late that the opportunity didn't pass you by. You let it. When you choose action, you shift the balance of power. Fear no longer dictates your pace. You may stumble, you may fail, but each attempt builds resilience. Each movement creates momentum, and momentum is everything. A single step may seem small, but it sets something in motion. It breaks inertia, and once inertia is broken, progress has a chance to build on itself. Momentum makes the next step easier, and then the next, until you've gone further than you imagined when you were standing still. Waiting promises safety, but it delivers stagnation. Action risks discomfort, but it creates life. And that's the central choice we face every day. Will we allow fear to keep us at the edge of the fog, or will we walk into it, trusting that the path will reveal itself as we move? The longer you wait, the louder fear becomes, but the moment you act, fear begins to fade. It never disappears completely, but it loses its hold because it no longer dictates your story. So ask yourself, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for the fear to vanish, for the path to become perfectly clear, for the guarantee that everything will work out? Those things will never arrive on their own. They are built through action. They are discovered step by step. The fog clears only when you walk. Progress only comes when you move. And if you choose to keep waiting, life will slip quietly past you. But if you dare to act, even clumsily, even imperfectly, you'll discover that waiting was never protection. It was the very thing holding you back. So many people live their lives in the waiting room of their own dreams. They keep rehearsing, planning, imagining, but never actually stepping into the world with action. They tell themselves they're not ready yet, that they need more time, more clarity, more confidence before they can begin. But here's the truth. Readiness isn't something you wait for, it's something you earn through movement. It isn't the spark that starts the fire, it's the flame that grows once you've already lit the match. Every small action you take becomes proof to your own mind that you're not powerless, that you're capable, that you can move forward even when you don't feel prepared. The first step doesn't come after belief. The first step is what builds it. It's easy to believe that some magical feeling of readiness will appear one morning, like a sign from the universe that today is the day. But waiting for that moment is one of the most dangerous illusions we can fall into. Seneca warned, "While we wait for life, life passes." If you wait for the perfect time, you'll wait forever. The conditions will never feel flawless, and even if they did, fear would still whisper that you need more proof before you act. The only cure for that cycle is to break it, to move, to stumble, to take a step before you feel like you're ready. Because only in doing do you discover that you can handle more than you thought. Think about how confidence actually grows. It doesn't drop from the sky as a gift. It's built like a wall, brick by brick, each one laid down by experience. The first time you try something, you feel shaky. The second time, it's a little easier. The third, easier still. Over time, the very thing that once terrified you becomes second nature. You didn't wait for readiness, you created it. The first step was the hardest, but it was also the most important because it started the cycle of evidence that carried you forward. This is why so many people underestimate the power of small beginnings. We think only grand gestures matter, but it's the tiny, quiet steps, the email sent, the first page written, the awkward conversation started, that hold the greatest power. Those are the moments that shift the story in your mind. You stop being someone who only dreams and start becoming someone who does. The first step also changes the relationship you have with fear. Before action, fear feels enormous. It grows in your imagination, exaggerating every possible failure. But when you move, you realize the monster wasn't as big as you thought. Fear thrives in stillness, but it weakens in motion. The act of doing, even poorly, shrinks it. You suddenly see that you can survive discomfort, rejection, even failure. And once you've seen that, fear loses much of its power. Waiting, on the other hand, magnifies fear. The longer you stand at the edge of something, the more intimidating it appears. Think about how water feels when you hesitate at the edge of a cold pool. The longer you stand there, the harder it becomes to jump. But once you leap, the shock is brief and your body adapts. Life works the same way. The leap feels unbearable until you do it. Then it becomes manageable. And with each new dive into discomfort, you grow stronger. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But once you know something is right and true for you, the next step is not to endlessly deliberate. It's to begin. Philosophy, reflection, planning, they all have value. But without the discipline of action, they turn into excuses. The first step embodies the principle that thought must be lived, not just entertained. It transforms ideals into practice. There's also a strange momentum that comes from beginnings. Once you've broken the inertia, you find that energy builds. One action leads to another. The project you avoided starts to take shape. The change you dreaded begins to feel natural. Motion creates motion. This is why the hardest part of any endeavor is usually the beginning, not the continuation. The first step demands courage without evidence. Every step after that is fueled by the proof you've already created. It's important to see that the first step doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't need to solve everything at once. In fact, it usually won't. It just needs to exist. Too often, people paralyze themselves by believing their first step has to be perfect. But imperfection is inevitable. Think of a writer staring at a blank page. They may agonize for hours, waiting for the perfect sentence. But the moment they write anything, even messy, clumsy words, the page is no longer blank. The work has begun. The same is true in every area of life. You don't need to launch flawlessly. You need to begin imperfectly, because from there you can refine, adapt, grow. Without the first step, there's nothing to improve. And this principle doesn't just apply to goals or ambitions. It applies to personal growth too. Healing, change, transformation, they all begin with a first act. Reaching out for help. Admitting a truth to yourself, choosing to forgive. Those moments are often small in the eyes of the world, but enormous in the life of the individual. They're the beginning of a new story. And like all beginnings, they don't require readiness. They require honesty and courage. The beauty of the first step is that it redefines your identity. Before, you were someone who wanted, someone who hoped, someone who thought. After, you become someone who acts. That shift in self-image is powerful because it teaches your mind to see you differently. You start carrying yourself with more certainty, not because you've already succeeded, but because you're finally moving. Jung understood this when he wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The first step is a kind of awakening. It's the moment you stop dreaming and begin living into the dream. And here's the deeper truth. No one ever feels truly ready. Those you admire, the ones who inspire you with their courage and achievements, didn't start because they felt certain. They started because they knew waiting would cost them more than trying. They were willing to face the awkwardness of beginnings, trusting that readiness would follow. And it always does. With every attempt, every stumble, every lesson, readiness grows. So the question becomes, what is the step you've been avoiding? What is the moment you've been waiting to feel prepared for? Because waiting will never give you what you're hoping for, only moving will. Readiness isn't a prerequisite, it's a byproduct. Confidence doesn't lead to action, action leads to confidence. Power doesn't precede the first step, it's created by it. And once you've taken that step, something remarkable happens. The story you've been telling yourself shifts. You stop saying, "I can't." You start saying, "I did." And that small shift changes everything. The first step becomes the seed of a new life, proof that you are capable of more than you thought, evidence that you're no longer powerless. From there, every step builds on the last, and what once seemed impossible becomes simply the path you're walking. The first step is not just movement, it's transformation. It's the choice to stop waiting and start becoming. And once you've taken it, you'll look back and realize that readiness was never something you needed. It was something you built, one step at a time. When you act as if everything works out for you, something subtle but undeniable begins to happen. Your energy shifts. You carry yourself differently. There's a steadiness in your voice, a quiet conviction in the way you move, and people notice it even if they can't explain why. They feel it in your presence, not in your speeches. They sense that you believe in your own path, and that belief becomes contagious. Others start to trust you not because you promise them certainty, but because you embody resilience. You begin to inspire without even trying, not through slogans or empty reassurances, but through the way you stand in the world. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." That's what happens when belief is lived rather than just spoken. Your conviction becomes a catalyst. When people interact with you, something in them shifts. They start to see themselves reflected in your strength, and for a moment, they imagine what it would feel like to carry that same steadiness. Belief spreads not because you demand it, but because you embody it. Presence becomes more persuasive than words. Think about the people who've inspired you most in your own life. Chances are, it wasn't because they gave you the most eloquent advice or laid out a flawless plan. It was the way they carried themselves in difficulty, the calm with which they navigated chaos, the quiet refusal to be crushed by circumstances. They might not have even been aware of the effect they had on you, but their belief in themselves, in the process, in the possibility of moving forward, became proof you could borrow. You saw in them evidence that it was possible to endure, to keep going, to trust that things would eventually align. This is why leadership has less to do with authority and more to do with presence. A leader who radiates panic spreads panic. A leader who radiates steadiness spreads calm. People don't simply follow instructions, they mirror energy. And energy grounded in belief can shift entire groups, entire families, even entire cultures. When you show up with conviction, you make it easier for others to believe too. You lower the psychological cost of courage. You remind them that fear doesn't have to dictate the story. Belief is contagious because humans are wired to mirror one another. Neuroscience calls it the mirror neuron system, the part of our brains that lights up not only when we take action, but when we see someone else act. It's why watching someone stay calm in crisis makes us calmer, why seeing someone act with courage stirs courage in us. Your belief is not just your own. It radiates outward, shaping the way others think, feel, and behave. That's why the way you carry yourself matters. Even in the moments you think no one is watching, there's a kind of unspoken trust that emerges when you meet someone who moves with belief. They don't flinch at the first sign of difficulty. They don't crumble when things go off plan. They adapt, adjust, and keep going. That steadiness is magnetic. People want to be around it. They want to understand it. They want to borrow it for themselves. Think about how this works in small, everyday interactions. The co-worker who shows up to a stressful project with calm focus lifts the energy of the entire team. The friend who listens with patience instead of judgment opens space for honesty. The parent who carries faith during uncertain times steadies their children, teaching them trust by example. None of these people gave speeches. They simply lived their belief, and others absorbed it. The ripple effect of presence can stretch further than we ever realize. But belief spreads in another way too, through resilience. When people see you fall and get back up, something inside them stirs. Failure is universal, but so is the possibility of renewal. Watching someone embody the belief that setbacks are not the end, but the beginning of growth, reminds us that we too can survive our own losses. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." When you live as if difficulty is training, not punishment, you give others a model for their own hardships. Your resilience becomes their evidence. This is why it's not enough to say the right things. Words without presence rarely inspire. Belief without embodiment doesn't spread. But when your actions and your presence align, people feel it. They may not even be able to name it, but they'll walk away from you different, lighter, steadier, braver. Your belief becomes the spark that lights something in them. The contagion of belief is also why communities, families, and cultures can either spiral downward or rise upward. One person's fear can infect a group, making everyone more cautious, more doubtful, more resigned. But the reverse is also true. One person's steady trust can lift the tone of an entire room. It only takes one person refusing to collapse for others to realize they can stand too. This is why optimism is not just a personal choice. It's a responsibility. You never know who is borrowing courage from your presence. Epictetus taught, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." You don't inspire belief by convincing others with arguments. You inspire belief by living it so consistently that others see it in your footsteps. Embodiment spreads further than persuasion ever could. And in time, you become the kind of person others look to when they've lost faith in themselves, not because you hand them all the answers, but because you remind them that belief is still possible. The most remarkable thing is that belief's contagion doesn't always show its results immediately. Sometimes years later, someone will tell you, "I watched how you handled that moment, and it gave me the courage to do the same." You might not even remember it, but they do. Because when you chose to act as if things would work out, you became living evidence for them that they could too. And that evidence lives on long after the moment has passed. So when you carry belief into the world, understand that it's never just for you. It ripples outward in ways you'll never fully measure. The way you respond to challenge, the steadiness you carry into uncertainty, the hope you hold in the face of setbacks, all of it speaks louder than words. You stop inspiring with what you say and start inspiring with who you are. And in a world where doubt spreads like wildfire, belief might be the most important thing you can share. True leadership has very little to do with the title you wear, the position you hold, or the authority stamped next to your name. Titles can be given and taken away. Status can fade. Authority can be challenged. But leadership that endures is something much deeper. It's about becoming the living evidence that others can look at when they've lost belief in themselves. It's about carrying yourself with quiet conviction in such a way that your presence gives people permission to rise. You don't have to announce it, you don't have to demand it, you simply embody it. And in doing so, others begin to see possibilities they couldn't see before. Think about the leaders who have inspired you most. Often, it wasn't because they had all the answers. It wasn't because they gave flawless speeches or commanded attention with force. It was because they stood in difficulty without flinching. They carried themselves with a steadiness that made you feel safe, even in uncertainty. They believed in possibility when everyone else was tempted to give in to despair. And because they embodied belief, you found yourself believing a little more too. That's leadership, not control, but influence born from presence. And the impact of leading by example is often quiet, even invisible at first. You might not know who is watching you. A colleague notices how you remain calm when a project falls apart. A friend remembers the way you kept moving after loss. A child observes how you treat others when you think no one is paying attention. None of these moments may seem significant, but they plant seeds. Later, when those people face their own storms, they'll remember your example. They'll think, if they could carry themselves with conviction, so can I. Leadership through example also requires humility. It's not about projecting perfection. In fact, pretending to have everything figured out often creates distance, not connection. People don't need flawless leaders. They need leaders who are real. They need to see that you stumble, that you doubt, that you fail, and that you keep moving anyway. Your humanity becomes the bridge that makes your example believable. There's a unique kind of authority that comes from consistency. Anyone can stand tall for a moment, but when you carry yourself with conviction over time, through both wins and losses, people begin to trust you. They know your steadiness isn't a performance, it's a way of being. And trust is the foundation of all leadership. Without trust, people may obey out of fear, but they won't follow with their hearts. With trust, people willingly join you, not because they have to, but because they believe it's worth it. Leadership through example also has a ripple effect that goes far beyond what you can measure. You may never know the full extent of your influence. A small gesture, a kind word, a moment of grace in the face of anger, these things can echo in someone's life for years. Aristotle once noted, "Character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion." The character you embody doesn't just persuade in the moment. It shapes the stories people tell themselves long after the moment has passed. And here's the paradox. The more you focus on embodying belief rather than controlling others, the more influence you actually gain. People resist being forced, but they are drawn to authenticity. They may not agree with everything you say or do, but they cannot ignore the evidence of conviction lived out consistently. It's undeniable. It has weight. And in a world full of noise and empty promises, that kind of authenticity is rare and magnetic. The best leaders are not those who tell people what to do, but those who show people what is possible. They don't just point toward the mountain, they start climbing it. They don't just talk about resilience, they live it in front of you. They don't just define courage, they embody it when the moment demands it. And that embodiment doesn't just move them forward, it lifts everyone who sees it. So if you've ever doubted whether you're a leader, remember this: someone is already watching you, consciously or unconsciously, and learning from your example. You don't need a stage, a title, or an audience. Leadership begins in the way you live each day, the way you respond to setbacks, the way you carry yourself when no one applauds, the way you act when the easier choice would be to quit. Those choices create evidence, and that evidence becomes permission for others to rise. Leadership through example is less about commanding attention and more about offering presence. It is less about speeches and more about consistency. It is less about being above others and more about walking alongside them, showing that the path is survivable, even meaningful. And the beauty of this kind of leadership is that it doesn't end with you. It creates ripples that move through lives you'll never fully see. In the end, leadership is not about being followed. It's about what you leave behind in the hearts of those who crossed your path. If you carry yourself with conviction, with humility, with resilience, then long after your words are forgotten, your example will remain. And that example may be the very thing someone leans on when they need it most. That is the true weight of leadership, not status, not titles, not recognition, but the quiet, steady presence that becomes evidence for others to believe in themselves. Failure is one of the most feared words in our vocabulary, and yet it is one of the most misunderstood. We treat it as if it's the end of the road, a final verdict stamped on our worth, a door slammed shut forever. But failure is rarely the end. More often, it's the beginning of a new path, one we couldn't have found otherwise. When you see failure not as proof of inadequacy but as feedback, something changes inside you. The weight you once carried begins to feel lighter because setbacks no longer crush you, they shape you. They become the raw material for strength. The truth is, rejection is often redirection. We rarely see it in the moment because pain clouds our vision. A closed door feels personal, final, humiliating. But later, with time and distance, we begin to notice something curious. That job we didn't get made room for the opportunity that fit us better. That relationship ending pushed us toward growth we had avoided. That project collapsing forced us to build something stronger. What looked like ruin was, in fact, restructuring. It helps to remember that failure has been the companion of every meaningful achievement in history. The inventors, the artists, the leaders we admire weren't spared from mistakes. They were defined by how they handled them, Thomas Edison famously said he hadn't failed, he had simply found thousands of ways that didn't work. Each so-called failure was data, feedback guiding him closer to the breakthrough. What if you began to see your own setbacks the same way? Not as proof you're unworthy, but as information shaping your growth. But failure doesn't just build strength, it builds humility. When you've been knocked down, you understand in your bones that success isn't owed to anyone. You stop seeing progress as linear and start recognizing the hidden valleys in every journey. This humility isn't weakness. It grounds you. It makes you more compassionate with yourself and others. You stop looking at people who struggle as less than and start realizing they're just human, like you. That kind of humility is magnetic because it's real. People trust those who have fallen and risen more than those who've never been tested. At the same time, reframing failure frees you from perfectionism. Too many people waste years waiting for flawless conditions, terrified of making a mistake. But mistakes are unavoidable. Perfection is an illusion that paralyzes. The only way forward is through trial, through experiment, through error. When you begin to see failure as feedback, every experience becomes usable. Rejection stops being a wall and becomes a mirror. It shows you what needs to be adjusted, what skills to sharpen, what mindset to shift. A failed relationship might teach you how to communicate more clearly. A failed business might reveal the gaps in your preparation. A failed attempt at change might show you the deeper fears you need to confront. Each failure whispers, "Not this way. Try another." Instead of crushing you, it prepares you for what's next. And failure often prepares you for things you can't even imagine yet. What feels like devastation now may turn out to be the foundation of something far better. History is full of people whose greatest setbacks set the stage for their defining moments. Jung said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. That secret order often reveals itself only in hindsight." The chaos of failure can be the very process by which life rearranges itself into a pattern you couldn't have designed. Of course, this doesn't mean failure feels good. It doesn't. It hurts. It stings. It can shake your confidence and make you question your path. But pain isn't the enemy. Pain is the proof that you dared to try, that you put something of yourself into the world. And when you're willing to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it, you discover it has lessons to teach. You realize you're not as fragile as you thought. You see that the worst-case scenario is survivable, and that knowledge alone is liberating. Failure also strips away illusions. It forces you to face the truth about what you really want. Sometimes we chase goals for the wrong reasons: ego, approval, comparison. Failure has a way of shaking those motives loose, leaving behind only what truly matters. That's why so many people say that failure clarified their path more than success ever did. Success can distract you. Failure makes you honest. And something else happens when you begin reframing failure. Your relationship with risk changes. Instead of avoiding challenges out of fear, you start seeking them because you know even if you fail, you'll grow. This shift makes you bolder. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What will I learn?" Suddenly, risk isn't terrifying, it's fuel. It becomes the arena where transformation happens. Think of the strongest people you know personally. Chances are their strength wasn't built in easy seasons. It was forged in moments when they stumbled, when they lost, when things didn't go the way they hoped. You admire them not because their path was smooth, but because they kept walking when it wasn't. That's the gift of failure. It gives you the chance to practice resilience in a way success never could. And here's the irony. When you stop fearing failure, you actually increase your chances of success. You're willing to try more, experiment more, put yourself out there more. Each attempt, successful or not, brings you closer to your goal. While others are still standing at the edge, paralyzed by the thought of failing, you've already taken 10 steps forward. You've failed, adjusted, learned, and kept going. By the time they take their first step, you've built a body of experience that nothing can replace. Reframing failure is not about pretending everything is positive. It's about refusing to waste your pain. If you're going to fall, you might as well rise with something new in your hands: knowledge, wisdom, strength. Every obstacle can make you stronger for what's next if you let it. Every rejection can redirect you closer to what you're meant for if you're willing to look at it that way. So the next time failure finds you, and it will, remember that you have a choice. You can let it be the end of your story, or you can let it be the turning point. You can treat it as evidence you weren't enough, or you can treat it as feedback guiding you to become more. The obstacle isn't there to stop you, it's there to shape you. And perhaps the most important truth of all is this: the world doesn't remember people for their flawless victories. It remembers them for their resilience, for their willingness to keep going, for their ability to transform failure into growth. If you can begin to see failure in that light, not as a final judgment, but as preparation, you'll discover that the very moments you once feared most can become the foundation of your greatest strength. The people we admire most are rarely those who walked through life without resistance. It is almost never the ones who had an easy path, free of obstacles and challenges that leave a lasting mark on us. Instead, it's the ones who kept going when things didn't make sense. The ones who pressed forward without guarantees, who leaned on belief when clarity wasn't available. Their resilience didn't come from certainty. It came from trust, conviction, and the decision to keep moving even when the ground beneath them felt shaky. These are the people whose stories stir us, because they remind us that strength isn't born in calm waters, but in storms. And at the center of that strength, there is always belief. Resilience is not about never breaking, it's about never staying broken. You fall, you stumble, you get bruised by life, but belief whispers, this isn't where the story ends. That belief is what helps you rise, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but always with something new in your hands. When life throws uncertainty at us, the easy response is to freeze, to wait until everything makes sense before moving. But waiting rarely produces answers. The ones who inspire us most didn't wait for certainty. They trusted their capacity to adapt along the way. They believed that even without seeing the whole path, each step forward would reveal more. And this belief-based resilience doesn't just shape outcomes, it shapes identity. Each time you face hardship and refuse to collapse, you start to see yourself differently. You begin to trust your own strength. The next storm doesn't feel quite as terrifying because you carry evidence of what you've already endured. That evidence becomes belief, and that belief becomes resilience. It's a cycle, but it begins with the decision to move rather than surrender. Think about someone you've watched endure hardship. Maybe a family member, a friend, or even a public figure. What struck you most wasn't that they had all the answers, but that they didn't give up. They embodied a kind of faith, not necessarily in a specific outcome, but in their ability to find a way through. Their belief wasn't naive, it was practical. It gave them the strength to stay in the fight long enough for things to turn. And in witnessing that, you were reminded of your own capacity to endure. Resilience doesn't just lift the person who carries it, it lifts those who see it. But belief isn't something you just stumble into, it's something you practice. It's choosing again and again to interpret difficulties as preparation rather than punishment. It's remembering that rejection might be redirection, that setbacks might be setups for something greater. And resilience built through belief has a quiet authority. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It carries itself with steadiness that others can feel. This is why resilient people are often the ones others look to in chaos. Their calmness isn't because they know the outcome. It's because they trust their ability to adapt, to endure, to keep going, regardless of outcome. What's powerful about this mindset is that it doesn't require extraordinary talent, intelligence, or resources. It requires belief. Belief that your story isn't over when things go wrong. Belief that even in pain, something valuable can be found. Belief that setbacks are temporary and growth is permanent. And this belief isn't just for monumental crises. It applies in the everyday too. The small frustrations, the disappointments, the moments when nothing seems to be working. Each time you practice resilience in the small things, you prepare yourself for the larger storms. Of course, none of this means resilience makes life easy. Struggles still hurt, losses still sting, uncertainty still shakes you. But resilience doesn't remove the storm. It gives you an anchor within it. Over time, this way of living transforms how you see yourself. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this making of me?" That subtle shift is the essence of resilience. It changes your relationship with hardship. Instead of being something you merely survive, it becomes something that shapes you into someone stronger, wiser, more capable. And resilience spreads. When others see you endure with belief, they gain courage to do the same. Your presence becomes proof that survival and growth are possible. You don't need to give a speech or offer advice. The way you carry yourself becomes the evidence. You become a living reminder that resilience is not about certainty, but about belief. And in a world where fear spreads quickly, that kind of belief is contagious in the best possible way. The people who inspire us most are the ones who embodied this truth. They weren't immune to pain. They weren't spared from loss. They weren't given clear answers. But they chose to keep moving anyway, to trust that the next step would lead somewhere meaningful. And in that choice, they built resilience, not just for themselves, but for everyone watching. So when your own path feels heavy, when the ground feels unsteady, remember this: resilience doesn't require certainty, it requires belief. Belief that you can take the next step. Belief that obstacles can become the way forward. Belief that you are being shaped, not destroyed. And each time you act from that place, you strengthen not just yourself, but everyone who crosses your path. Because resilience, built through belief, isn't just survival. It's transformation. It's the decision to keep becoming, even when life doesn't make sense. And that decision is what makes you unshakable. The strongest people in life are not always the ones who speak the loudest, who push their presence into the room, or who make themselves impossible to ignore. Strength is not always noise. Often, true strength is quiet. It's steady. It's the person who doesn't have to prove themselves in every conversation because their presence speaks louder than their words. The quiet authority of steadiness is a rare quality, but when you encounter it, you feel it instantly. It changes the atmosphere of a room. When storms rage around them, they don't flail or panic. They remain anchored, and in their steadiness, others find their own ground. People who embody steadiness live as if this is true. They may not see the order yet, but they trust it exists. While others get swept up in the chaos of fear, outrage, or uncertainty, they stand still, and their calm becomes a mirror that reflects possibility back to those around them. It isn't that they are unaffected by life. They feel the sting of setbacks, the weight of loss, the uncertainty of the unknown. But they refuse to let those feelings dictate their posture. Their authority comes not from control over others, but from mastery over themselves. This kind of authority doesn't need to be demanded. because people naturally gravitate toward it. Think of moments when things fell apart at work, in your family, or among friends. Panic spreads quickly. Emotions spiral. People look for someone, anyone, who isn't drowning. And when they see someone steady, someone grounded, they cling to that presence, not because that person has all the answers, but because they carry themselves as if the answers can be found. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself in his meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The steady person lives by this truth, and their example brings others back to it. The quiet authority of steadiness is built, not born. It grows from the daily discipline of choosing not to be carried away by every impulse or every headline. It comes from practicing patience, holding perspective, and refusing to let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. Aristotle once wrote, "Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet." That patience, the ability to remain composed when others are restless, is the fruit that creates trust. People may not admire the loudest voice in the room for long, but they will remember the steady presence that helped them through chaos. What makes steadiness so powerful is that it doesn't deny reality. It doesn't look at storms and pretend the skies are clear. Instead, it says, "Yes, the storm is here, but it will not define me." It acknowledges fear without letting fear lead. It feels doubt without surrendering to it. That balance is what creates quiet authority. Because while others argue, complain, or collapse, the steady person keeps moving with measured steps. Their progress may not be flashy, but it endures long after the noise has faded. The steady person knows this and accepts trials as part of life's refining process. They don't waste energy wishing away the difficulty. They use it. They let it teach them patience, perspective, and resilience. Over time, that practice creates an inner stillness that no outside chaos can fully disturb. And when others witness that, they lean into it, because it represents a stability they crave but haven't yet mastered. The quiet authority of steadiness also protects you from the traps of ego. Loudness often comes from insecurity, from needing to prove something to the world. But steadiness needs no performance. It is not about being admired or recognized. It is about being aligned with yourself, calm in your values, clear in your direction. And there is a kind of magnetic trust that comes from this. When people see you are not reactive, they feel safer around you. They know you won't fly off the handle at the first provocation. They know you won't crumble when things get hard. They know you won't betray your values just because the pressure increases. This consistency, this steadiness, builds trust more deeply than charm ever could. Trust, after all, is not built in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of calm choices made under pressure. Think about how this quality reshapes environments. A family where one person refuses to escalate in arguments sets a new tone. A workplace where one leader remains calm under fire steadies the whole team. A community that follows someone steady rather than someone loud builds itself on patience instead of panic. The quiet authority of steadiness ripples outward, lowering the temperature wherever it goes. Its influence is subtle but profound. And the irony is, the quiet authority of steadiness often outlasts the loudest voices. People may remember someone's fiery words for a moment, but they remember steadiness for a lifetime. They remember the person who was there when things were uncertain, who remained composed when others fell apart, who carried themselves with dignity when dignity felt impossible. That memory becomes evidence, something others borrow when they face their own storms. Resilience and steadiness are not glamorous. They don't demand attention, but they are powerful precisely because they endure. In a world addicted to noise, anger, and speed, The person who remains calm, thoughtful, and steady stands out more than ever. They are the anchor in waters that toss others back and forth. They are the quiet presence that reminds people not everything needs to be frantic. They embody the kind of authority that doesn't have to be claimed because it's already recognized. So if you want to embody real strength, don't worry about being the loudest. Don't worry about proving yourself in every conversation. Focus instead on building steadiness, on mastering your emotions, aligning with your values, practicing patience, and trusting your capacity to endure. Because the strongest people are not those who shout the most. They are the ones who stay anchored when storms rage. Their calm resolve changes the temperature of every room they enter, leaving behind something far more powerful than noise, a quiet authority that others can trust, lean on, and be inspired by. So much of life is spent waiting for validation. We hold back until someone else confirms that we're good enough, smart enough, talented enough, worthy enough. We look for signs from the world that we belong before we dare to take a step. But the truth is that waiting never ends. The world doesn't line up to hand out permission slips for your life. If you spend your time waiting to be chosen, you'll spend your life on the sidelines. At some point, you have to stop waiting for proof and become your own evidence. You have to let your actions, your persistence, your courage be the undeniable facts that no one can take away from you. Think about how we often measure ourselves. We tell ourselves, if I succeed in this job, then I'll know I'm competent. If this relationship works out, then I'll know I'm lovable. If this project gets recognition, then I'll know I have value. But this way of thinking places all the power outside of us. It puts our worth in the hands of circumstances we can't control. And that's a dangerous trap, because success isn't always immediate, recognition isn't always given, and people don't always see your value right away. If your belief in yourself depends entirely on external approval, you'll always be fragile. But if you create your own evidence through persistence and courage, you'll carry a kind of strength that no one else can take away. When you think of yourself as someone waiting to be validated, your life will reflect hesitation and doubt. But when you think of yourself as someone capable of building evidence through your actions, your life begins to reflect strength and movement. Every time you choose action over hesitation, you strengthen that thought. Every time you try again after failure, you reinforce it. Happiness doesn't come from waiting for recognition. It comes from creating evidence that you are already living with purpose. And this is the secret. Evidence doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be a grand victory or a monumental achievement. It can be as simple as showing up when you said you would, finishing the task you wanted to avoid, or pushing through discomfort instead of retreating. These small actions matter because they prove something to you. They remind you that you are someone who follows through, someone who doesn't quit at the first sign of difficulty. Each small piece of evidence builds trust in yourself, and trust is the foundation of confidence. Waiting for others to prove your worth is one of the greatest wastes of time. The minutes, hours, and years you spend holding back could have been spent building evidence. Imagine how much stronger, how much more resilient you would be if every moment of doubt had been answered with action. Instead of wasting energy waiting for permission, you'd be building momentum. You'd be creating a trail of proof that says, I am capable because I've acted. Of course, building evidence for yourself doesn't mean ignoring failure. It means reframing failure as part of the evidence. Every rejection, every misstep, every mistake is proof too. Proof that you dared, that you learned, that you survived. Failure isn't the absence of evidence, it's one of the strongest forms of it. Because every time you rise again, you prove that your belief in yourself is bigger than any setback. Becoming your own evidence also changes the way others see you. People aren't inspired by words alone. They're inspired by presence, by consistency, by the way you live when life is difficult. When you embody resilience, people feel it. They see in your example the permission to believe in themselves. Your evidence becomes a kind of shared strength. Without even realizing it, you become the proof that others lean on when their own belief wavers. That's why your courage matters not just for you, but for everyone watching. It's easy to underestimate the ripple effect of this. You may think your actions go unnoticed, that your persistence doesn't matter to anyone else. But the truth is, people are always watching. Friends, family, co-workers, even strangers. And when they see you persist, when they see you carry yourself with quiet conviction, they gain courage of their own. Your evidence becomes their evidence. Your example becomes the proof they borrow when they need strength. This doesn't mean the journey is easy. There will always be voices, both external and internal, that tell you you're not enough, that you need more validation before you move. There will always be moments when doubt feels louder than belief. But each time you act in spite of those voices, you weaken them. Each time you choose courage over hesitation, you shift the balance of power. Doubt may never disappear completely, but it doesn't have to. You don't need silence in your mind. You need evidence in your life, and evidence doesn't lie. You can tell yourself stories of inadequacy, but if your actions prove persistence, the evidence is undeniable. You can fear rejection, but if your actions prove resilience, the evidence outweighs the fear. Over time, evidence becomes stronger than doubt. It becomes a foundation you can stand on when everything else feels uncertain. The world will always have opinions. People will project their fears, their doubts, their judgments onto you. Some will underestimate you, others will dismiss you, but their opinions are not evidence, they're noise. The only evidence that matters is the evidence you create. And the beautiful thing is, once you've built enough of it, their noise can't touch you. You carry proof within yourself. You know who you are, not because someone told you, but because you've lived it. So stop waiting for the world to prove you're worthy. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect validation. Begin now, with small steps, with imperfect actions, with courage that doesn't need to be flawless. Each action is evidence. Each choice to persist is proof. Each moment of courage builds the case for your own strength. And one day, you'll look back and realize that you no longer needed the world to choose you. You chose yourself. You became your own evidence. And in doing so, you didn't just build a life. You built a legacy of proof that others can see, learn from, and follow. Because when you become your own evidence, you don't just free yourself from doubt. You light the path for others to believe in themselves too. Your mindset is never just your own. We like to imagine that what we think, how we carry ourselves, and the way we respond to life begins and ends with us. But that's never the case. The truth is, belief spreads. It leaks out into conversations, into body language, into the quiet moments where others are paying attention, even when we don't realize it. Friends, children, co-workers, even strangers. People are watching the way you respond to difficulty. They notice the tone in your voice when you're challenged, the way you carry yourself when things don't go your way, the steadiness you hold in uncertainty. And those observations plant seeds. When you act as if things always work out, you create ripples of possibility for everyone around you. You become a reference point, a model of what's possible when someone chooses to lead with belief instead of fear. Think about it. We've all been in a room where one person's energy shifts the atmosphere. Panic can spread quickly. Negativity can drain everyone. But so can calm, so can optimism, so can resilience. The mindset of one can change the mindset of many, and this ripple effect doesn't require big speeches or dramatic gestures. It happens in the smallest ways. The parent who keeps hope alive when the family is struggling. The friend who listens with patience instead of panic. The leader who shows steadiness in uncertainty rather than adding to the chaos. None of them may realize it in the moment, but their presence is shaping others. It's offering a subtle permission to believe, to keep going, to trust that the story isn't over. But the ripple of belief works in both directions. Just as your optimism can inspire, your despair can discourage. When you consistently respond with hopelessness, others learn hopelessness too. A child raised in the shadow of constant doubt may grow into an adult who doubts themselves. A team led by someone who expects failure will move timidly, as if the outcome is already sealed. This is why it's not only a personal choice to carry belief, it's a responsibility. The ripples you create don't stop at you. They move outward, shaping futures in ways you may never fully see. Consider the way belief spreads across generations. A parent who models persistence teaches it to their children more effectively than any words could. A mentor who faces challenges with optimism imprints that mindset on their students. These lessons often become invisible, woven into the habits and reflexes of those who witness them. Years later, in their own moments of trial, they'll remember, "This is how it's done. I saw it before." That is the ripple effect of belief, not in what you say once, but in what you consistently live. The beauty of this ripple is that you rarely know its reach. Someone you barely spoke to might remember how you carried yourself in a difficult situation. A co-worker might recall your steadiness years after you've parted ways. A friend might draw strength from your example in a moment you'll never know about. The impact of your belief is not always visible, but it is always present. Like ripples in water, it travels further than you imagine, touching shores you'll never see. And here's the deeper truth. Your ripple effect doesn't require perfection. People aren't inspired by flawless individuals who never stumble. They're inspired by those who stumble and keep going. They're inspired by those who admit doubt, but don't let doubt stop them. They're inspired by the humanity of belief, not the performance of it. So if you think your mindset is only about you, think again. Every time you choose belief over fear, you create permission for others to do the same. Every time you act as if things will work out, you steady someone else's trembling hands. Every time you embody resilience, you plant seeds of resilience in those who are watching. Your life is evidence, not only for yourself, but for everyone who crosses your path. The ripple effect of belief reminds us that our choices are never isolated. They radiate outward, shaping families, teams, and communities. In a world that so easily defaults to fear, your belief becomes an act of service. It steadies the rooms you walk into. It lifts the people who look to you. It builds bridges of possibility that others can walk across. And when you choose to act as if things always work out, you're not only transforming your own life, you're creating ripples that may one day transform the lives of countless others too. The story you tell yourself is more powerful than almost anything else in your life. It doesn't sit quietly in the background. It actively shapes how you move, how you speak, how you respond to setbacks. Stories aren't just thoughts. They are blueprints. They become the framework your life grows within. If you tell yourself a story of limitation, you'll live cautiously, shrinking from risk, certain that the world is against you. But if you tell yourself a story of possibility, of strength, of resilience, you carry yourself differently. You begin to walk with intention, to work with vision, to endure hardship with a deeper sense of meaning. That's why it matters to live the story you want to believe. Because in the end, belief isn't just an idea. It becomes a way of life. Think about how this works in practice. Two people face rejection. One says, "This always happens to me. I'm unlucky. I'll never succeed." The other says, "This wasn't the right fit. Something better is ahead." Same event, different story. And those stories will take them in completely different directions. One spirals downward, hesitant to try again. The other keeps moving forward, fueled by the belief that their path is still unfolding. Living the story you want to believe doesn't mean pretending reality isn't hard. It doesn't mean ignoring pain or plastering a false smile over difficulty. It means framing those difficulties in a way that allows you to grow instead of collapse. And stories don't only affect how we interpret pain, they also determine how we pursue possibility. A person who carries the story that the best is already behind them will walk with resignation. Their energy will drain because they believe nothing ahead is worth the effort. But a person who tells themselves the best is yet to come walks differently. They work with anticipation, endure with patience, and rise with hope. That story fuels persistence. It creates momentum, and it changes not only how they experience the present, but also how they build the future. Aristotle wrote, "Hope is a waking dream." The story you tell yourself is either a dream that wakes you up or one that keeps you asleep. When your inner narrative is filled with fear, you sleepwalk through life, repeating old patterns. When it's infused with belief, you wake up each day with intention. You begin to live as if the story you want is already unfolding. You embody it before the evidence arrives. That embodiment is what brings the evidence into existence. It's important to understand that living the story you want to believe doesn't always feel natural at first. Old narratives cling tightly. Self-doubt feels familiar, even comfortable. Changing your story feels like swimming against the current. But over time, as you repeat it and act in alignment with it, it becomes second nature. Each choice you make in alignment with a better story strengthens it. Each step forward writes another line. And slowly, the old story loses its grip. And this ripple effect is why the story you tell yourself is so important. It doesn't only determine your path, it influences the paths of those who look to you. Your resilience can become their reminder. Your hope can become their anchor. Your story can give them the courage to reframe their own, which means choosing your story is not just a personal responsibility. It's also a gift you give to others. It's also worth reflecting on how stories shape identity. The story you tell yourself becomes the filter through which you see your potential. If the story is, "I'm unlucky," you'll interpret every setback as proof. If the story is, "I'm capable of growth," you'll see setbacks as practice. Over time, those interpretations become identity, and identity shapes action. Before you know it, you're living into the very story you've been telling all along. This is why living the story you want to believe is not about pretending. It's about alignment. It's about making sure the story in your head matches the future you want to create. The strongest people you've met are not necessarily those who avoided hardship. They are the ones who wrote a story that gave their hardship meaning. They endured not because life was easy, but because their story allowed them to see beyond the immediate pain. That's why we remember them. That's why their lives inspire us. They remind us that stories are not just reflections of reality, they are tools for shaping it. And in the end, every day is a page. Every choice is a sentence. Every belief is a theme. The story you're telling now is building your future line by line. If you want a different future, you have to begin with a different story, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve. Now, because the story you live today is the foundation of the life you'll live tomorrow. So tell a story worth living and then live it. Live the story where setbacks are training. Live the story where rejection is redirection. Live the story where the best is yet to come. Because when you live that story, you don't just change your own life, you create a blueprint that others can follow. And there's no greater legacy than that. In the end, the story you live becomes the story you leave behind. Choose one that strengthens you, one that lifts others, one that proves resilience is always possible. If this message spoke to you, keep walking with us. Watch one of the videos on your screen now and carry the journey forward. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal, where together we turn philosophy into a way of life.